thought about it for a few years. And I test drove different vehicles and looked at different vehicles and rented different vehicles, and really thought that, I think it fits our lifestyle very well, because most of our driving on a typical day is well within reach of even the lowest range EVs.
This is Middle Tennessee Electric's Plugged In podcast. This podcast focuses on the world of electric vehicles. It is for all EV enthusiasts. Whether you are an early adopter and have been driving an EV for years, or you're just starting your research, this podcast is for you.
Hello, I'm Brandon Wagner.
And I'm Amy Byers, and we're together again for another edition of MTE's Plugged In podcast. And today we're doing something a little different. We're going to do an EV ride-along with Brad Gibson, who is the Chief Cooperative Business Officer for Middle Tennessee Electric. Welcome to the podcast, Brad.
Thank you, Amy. It's good to be here.
Great. So, we thought you've just got this new vehicle that you've got.
Just a couple months old.
Just a little baby, a Volkswagen ID.4.
That's right.
So this is kind of exciting, and we want to talk to you about it. So let's start with you kind of telling us what made you want to enter the world of electric vehicles.
Well, I like cutting edge technology, and I always have. And really, I'm starting to see the evolution of, automotive transportation moving into the tech world. And so I've been intrigued for a few years now. I've worked in electric cooperative since I was 17 years old, so I thought I really need to have a vehicle that uses the product we provide.
When you began your research, what did you think about, and what were kind of your thought processes to decide, can an EV work for me and my family? Because you have 2 children, correct? So
Correct.
You're a family of 4.
Yes.
So kind of talk us through that process.
Yeah, and we have a lot of family out of state as well. So the first thought was, well, what vehicle fits best for us? And this ended up being an additional vehicle. Our son's 15, and so we're going to have more vehicles than we've typically had at the house. And thought it was a really good time for us to make that transition to try it out. Realized as we thought about this, and I thought about it for a few years, and I test drove different vehicles and looked at different vehicles and rented different vehicles, and really thought that, I think it fits our lifestyle very well, because most of our driving on a typical day is well within reach of even the lowest range EVs. And certainly over the first couple of months here, that has certainly proved out to be true for us.
Yeah. So are you going to let your son drive it?
He has driven it
Okay.
with his permit. Now, once he has his full license and drives by himself, absolutely not.
There you go.
No, there are a few vehicles that he won't be able to touch, but
Yeah.
right now, yep. And he thought it's very strange for him because he's just learning to drive, and so this was very different than the old pickup truck that he typically gets to drive.
I bet.
Yeah.
Well, I know when we've done some of these ride-alongs before, the one kind of interesting thing, and I even think we talked about it in the last podcast we had where we were talking about maintenance, is where you're used to, when you need to put the brake on, you're used to using the brake to stop, and that with an electric vehicle, kind of coming off the gas kind of slows you down much more so than in a your traditional ICE vehicle.
That's right. Yeah, so this vehicle does have the braking option. I'm using it today, the one pedal driving, some people call it, and I've come to really, really enjoy it. It's different, and it takes a little while to get used to, but once you do, I prefer it over the traditional accelerator and brake.
Right, you just have to be careful when you go back to your gas
You
vehicle.
do, yes.
To not get in that habit. I wonder, as EVs become more and more popular and people maybe have those 2 vehicles, where you have the one ICE vehicle, if there'll be a little some rear ending going on, maybe.
That's right. Yep.
That'll be an interesting statistic to track, I think. So
I was going to ask if you had it on, because I didn't really feel it. And I know that the acceleration curve is a little different on this compared to other EVs, but have you noticed the one pedal braking is a little bit gentler than some of the other EVs?
I have found that, Brandon, that when I drove different vehicles, to me this one drives much more like a traditional ICE. So I don't know if that's good or bad, but I just found that it was a much more normal transition into this vehicle than it was when I was in other EVs.
So let's talk a little bit about you deciding on this particular, electric vehicle, because there's a whole lot out there. And then I want to know kind of your purchase process. So did you go into the dealership? Did you have to wait? Kind of tell us your EV ownership journey, so to speak.
So this is the first new vehicle I've ever purchased. I'm a used car person normally, and my normal buying experience is I go online. I've bought a vehicle on eBay online. They just drop it off at the house. So I'm not used to really interacting with the dealership. And it started off very much that way. I got online on the Volkswagen website. It started off with I had to put $100 reservation in for it, and it basically just puts you in a queue because there was a long wait. I ended up waiting about 9 months to get the vehicle. And then once you kind of get the reservation called, you go into configuring the vehicle you actually want. Again, all online. I haven't talked to a dealership at this point at all. And you put an additional I put an additional $400 down, I think is what was required. Both of those are fully refundable up until you take delivery, I believe. So that was kind of unique, and it felt very much like the experience that not only I expected, but I wanted. Mm-hmm. At that point, you did have to determine a dealership where the vehicle would be delivered. So I picked a local dealership. And just to be candid, I think that's one of the struggles of the process for me is the dealership model has got to evolve substantially because I ended up having to be at a dealership for a long period of time. The buying process was convoluted, difficult. They have a lot of work to do in that model, evolving in the right way, because my goal was to buy it online, and I thought probably somebody just drop it off at the house and we'd be done. If we needed to sign some paperwork and payment and all those different things, we'd be able to do that over email. I've done that numerous times for used vehicles, but this process was a lot clunkier.
Brandon, have you heard if that is the norm for all the EVs, or do you think, like maybe, the Nissan Leaf has been around for quite a bit, for years, so they probably have a different model. I just wonder if what he went through is pretty typical.
Well, I think that Tesla has set the standard for what that process needs to look like. It's a very hands-off, user-friendly experience. And I think the other dealers are just trying to figure out there's not as good a connection between the manufacturer and the dealer with all these other brands. And now when we picked up the Chevy Bolt, I literally showed up, they gave me the keys and said, see you later. And there was some paperwork that had to be done later on, but it was much quicker, much easier. I think that, perhaps Brad's experience was a little bit different than I've heard other people, but I've also, I think people will progress. Dealers will progress. The Carvanas of the world will create a better buying experience in the future.
Yeah. So you got your car, you went through all of that, you drove it home. So now let's focus on the Volkswagen ID.4 and kind of talk about your experience with it. What are some of the unique features? I will say, and I told you this when we were coming to get in, it is precious. I don't know if that's the word you want to use to describe your car, but it is a very cute. Okay, it is a very cute car. It's a lot of them are similar. The EVs kind of have a look to them, but I like the color of this one. I do think it's a sharp little car. Maybe sharp is a better word for you.
You can
than
use
precious,
whatever you want to offend me whatsoever.
It is a sharp car, and I do really like it. So let's talk a little bit about. First of all, I want to know, this is the first one I've seen.
Okay.
And I've not seen, really any that I have noticed other than this one. So do you get that kind of, people driving by looking at you or stopping you, or, that kind of experience by having kind of a unique car?
Yes, I've had quite a few people approach me, whether I'm in, our kids are in sports, and so I'll be, waiting on them at the parking lot. Folks have come up. What is that? I heard you pull in. It has a different sound about it. It has a little bit different look, but they haven't seen this before, and so then the questions start. And everything from, really excited, like, tell me all about it, to, folks that are clearly a little bit tepid about EVs. And well, have you run out of electricity? And just not necessarily negative, but maybe skeptical. And so it's a great opportunity to engage, and I've really enjoyed that part of it, honestly.
What are some of the other unique features? I know we were talking earlier. I love this whole, I don't know what you'd call this, but like a skylight or sunroof that goes the length of the vehicle. I'm not really sure, but that's pretty cool. What are some other features that the ID.4 have?
You'll get a good kick out of this because my other vehicle is a 2008 model. So, Amy, I'm not real sure what is a normal standard thing anymore and what is a new feature. So it's kind of a hard question. I'll say a few things that, the technology that's in this car. Just in the dash.
Say when I get in my car, it doesn't say, "Welcome, Amy," which I believe that's what happened when we got in this car. It was like, "Happy to see you." So.
Yeah, and it does the adaptive cruise control. It'll steer by itself. I would not call it at all, autonomous driving, as we hear people talk about those capabilities, especially with Tesla. It's not that, but it certainly has a lot of features that will correct your steering and do all those types of things when you're not paying attention, if you should be.
Right.
So that's very different. It's got a lot of things that I haven't figured out how to use yet. Like, it's got voice activation. And so you can talk to it like you would an Alexa or a Siri, and there are different commands. Now, it's certainly not nearly as advanced with the natural language. I've tried a few things, like I've been able to close the sunshade by voice command. I can never remember what it is, though. So, those features are there, but they're still not quite what I'd say as mature as what maybe some of us that are using those types of devices in our homes are used to.
Yeah.
So it's fun. It's very techy. Lots of buttons. Unlike other models, like a Tesla, feels very kind of plain, and the screen is the center. This feels more. There's more buttons like you would expect for cruise control and all those types of things in its more normal location.
The ones that I have been in, they all kind of have this center iPad-looking panel.
Yeah.
That what's above your steering wheel though is different.
Yes.
To me, I don't remember one really. You've seen more than I have seen, Brandon.
Yeah, I mean, I have seen something like that. The BMW, I think, has the coolest heads-up display.
Yeah.
And they'll actually, there's an option where you can project it on the windshield, which is kind of futuristic and cool.
Yeah.
But I do think that Volkswagen, Elon even said when he was asked who's going to be the biggest competitor to Tesla, and he said Volkswagen. And I mean, part of that's probably Germany is very committed to zero emission vehicles, but I think also the tech here is really classy. I mean, the buttons on the screen will kind of go into a almost like a sleep mode where they're just icons without the text. But then it senses your hand when you go up to touch it, and it'll kind of come to life. And it's really cool. Just it seems like a very responsive vehicle. I like the word classy because I do feel like it's tech, but it's not just overwhelming tech, and it's not function just for the sake of function. It's really a luxury vehicle and Brad, one of the things that I liked about the Volkswagen ID.4 is that it doesn't really, from 100 yards away, look like an electric vehicle. It looks like a regular car that is driven by electric motor. So I think they've done a good job of figuring out kind of a niche. There's not anything else like the ID.4 in the EV market.
Yeah.
So we know that EVs kind of have the reduced maintenance costs. You don't have oil changes or spark plugs or things like that, and of course you're not going to the gas station. But kind of you can kind of talk about your experience with that. But another question I have for you too is kind of how, when you're talking about insurance, you think about sometimes rates are higher. Like if you're insuring your almost 16-year-old,
that's right.
That may be a whole nother conversation. But talk to us a little difference about insurance and was it the same? Was it what you were expecting? And any other cost savings, or the opposite? Maybe you're having to pay more for certain things when you're talking about EVs and EV ownership.
Well, just to kind of tackle that last portion of the question, so far I haven't found anything that is more expensive. My experience so far is that not only just the cost, but the convenience. I mean, I don't have to go find a place to have my oil changed. It doesn't take time out of my Saturday. It doesn't need to be, scheduled or all those different pieces. And so certainly the cost is very real, but also just the time that it takes to kind of manage those things has been beneficial. From an insurance perspective, I would say this is an additional vehicle for us, and so it did add cost, but it added way less cost than I expected. I mean, just, a few $100s. I can't remember the exact number, but
good.
it was so small that we were making sure that it was, accurate, that they had the right vehicle, and so that felt pretty good that the insurance
We'll have this conversation again when it's time to insure your 16-year.
I'm very, very nervous about that.
I've had, of course, I have a daughter, and it was a shocker. And I think the boys are worse when you're talking about insuring these new drivers. So,
oh boy.
So we've been riding around for a while. So now we're going to talk about range.
Yeah.
We have been riding around. It's been a very pleasant, very nice ride around. But have you taken it beyond just riding around, maybe to and from work or Murfreesboro? Kind of how long can you go if you want to, maybe take a trip? But kind of what are your experiences on that? Yeah,
I haven't had it out of state yet, but I have gone on a lot of different communities around the area for soccer and sports with the kids, things of that nature, and work-related things where I need to go to Nashville and then to, Franklin and then over to Wilson County. And what I've found is on my typical day, I don't drive that much at all. On a day that maybe is atypical, my range has never been a concern that I can't go where I need to go. Now, what has been surprising is that when I'm on the freeway, of course, I try to drive the speed limit. Sometimes I go a little faster than the speed limit, but the range decreases substantially when you're going those speeds. So when I'm around town, which is most of my running around, the range actually is better than anticipated. The range that I think is like 260 some miles is what it says it will have. Based on my driving around town, one time I charged it completely and it said my range was going to be over 300 miles.
Wow.
So depending on your driving behavior, depending on where you're driving, does have a pretty big impact on what that range is. But even when I'm on 840, 65, 24, and just going all around the Middle Tennessee region, I haven't been in a situation where I've been concerned about my range.
So you may, you may not have even noticed this yet, but have you noticed whether, if you're really running the air or you're running the heat, if that impacts, how that impacts?
So I haven't had the heat yet,
Yeah.
Piece of it, but so far the air conditioning is not a factor at all. I haven't noticed some of those early things. Gosh, we heard the rumors of I ran my windshield wipers and my range went down.
Yeah.
I'm not noticing any of those types of impacts. I believe they've even changed the type of heating and cooling system in this car so that it is more efficient when it is on heat as well. So I'm anxious to see, what that looks like. It does have heated seats and heated steering wheel. So I think they're doing some things too where you can feel warmth where you're at without necessarily having the same impact in the entire cabin.
Several drivers tell me that if I heat my hands and I heat my seat, it's amazing how much more the rest of me feels warm, and that when they're planning a long trip, that they'll do that rather than turn their heat on.
Yeah.
I do, when it's plugged in, you can use an app and precondition it. I've done that a few times where you can just, when it was hot out this summer when I had it, just turn on the air conditioner while it's still plugged in, and it's cool when you get in the car and take off.
Yeah.
The app, I'm glad you brought that up because I was going to ask if there was an app and what things you can do. Obviously, you just shared that, but what about monitoring your charging while you're charging up? And also, on a cold day, we've had a couple of cold days. I'm curious if you've noticed the range decrease when it's colder outside, as well as, do you kind of warm your car up to get the battery chemistry going on a cold day? Is there something in the app that allows for that?
Yes, you can precondition it, and I think preconditioning also does that to the battery. I believe, Brandon, I'm not 100% certain. This vehicle stays in a garage. It's not a fully conditioned garage, but it doesn't get overly cold or overly hot. So I haven't done that when leaving the house.
Okay.
And I haven't noticed it yet. Again, I don't think we've had extreme enough temperatures where I'd notice it leaving work in the evening.
Okay.
I want to kind of wind down the discussion on the ID.4, and I kind of want to know, you've had it for a few months now. Are you happy with it? Would you rebuy this? I mean, would you encourage others to buy this? Kind of what are your thoughts on the Volkswagen ID.4?
Yeah, I would not hesitate to recommend the ID.4 as being one of the EVs that somebody looks at, right? Make sure it fits your lifestyle. But generally speaking, I would certainly say I could recommend an EV without a doubt at this point. I don't think I would ever replace this car and it not be an EV at this point. I enjoy driving it. The range is only going to get better and better as battery technology evolves. So check out the ID.4, but check out EVs. I really think that there's probably a spot in everyone's garage at some point in the near future for one.
Any tips for people out there shopping for them?
Yeah, go drive them. And don't just drive them, go find a ride and drive event. Don't just go to the dealership, that's fine. Also, I'd encourage folks once they really get serious about a specific model, I'd really encourage them to consider even renting one on Turo. Keep it at the house for a weekend. Take it on a short trip. Find out what it's like to charge with even just level 1, meaning the standard plug that's in your garage or your house, and see how you do with that and really get a feel for it.
So Brad, thanks for riding around with us. I'm not going to let you off the hook yet. We're going to continue driving around because I have more questions, and I definitely want to dive into kind of what Middle Tennessee Electric's doing for this EV initiative. So until next time, thank you for listening. If you have any questions or if you have any ideas for podcasts, please email us at evcarclub@mte.com. If you would like information on any of our programs, you can go to mte.com/drive EV. And until next time, plug in, power up, and drive safe.